Welcome to Magical Reawakening Radio. I am your host, Megan. I am excited to be back with you. We are almost at the dark moon for the month of October. It'll be our dark new moon for Libra. And so we're going to talk about that today. I also am going to talk about the fact that the sun is about to move into Scorpio season and talk about how that relates to our death card in tarot, which will be fun to talk about. And I will pull a card at the end that has to do with what we might be able to do when it comes to how we approach this new moon coming up. And there might be some tangents here and there along the way, but those are the main points I would like to hit today. So let's dive in. So I am recording this on Thursday. We are going to have it uploaded on Friday. But the new moon happens on October 21st. It is our final day of Libra season. And if you remember from episode 5, I talked a bit about Libra and its connection to the Justice card in the Major Arcana. And so when we have a new moon, it is when the moon and the sun are in the same sign. And so that means that this new moon is also connected to justice. So we kind of have an extra oomph of this idea of what the justice card embodies. And if you haven't listened to or watched episode 5, here's a little breakdown about justice. So the justice card is our card about truth and our card about balance. And as I spoke about in episode 5, a lot of that gets confused where balance means equal. We have to remember that not all things weigh out as equal. We're talking about balance on a scale. And so when we look at the way things stack up against one another, when they're in balance, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be an equal number of those things. When you're weighing 5 apples against marshmallows, your apples weigh a bit different than your marshmallows do, and you're going to need a lot more marshmallows to get that balance between the weights, right? And obviously there are other ways that we can define finding that balance, and that is really what a lot of Libra season and the Justice card actually asks us to do. It is a reminder to come back to ourselves and judge for ourselves what it is that we are looking for when we're trying to find balance in our life. What is the truth of the matter, and how does that weigh up against other facts and information that come our way, and how do we then integrate it into our truth, and how do we see that in comparison to what others consider as their truth and the grander truth of it all, of how all those pieces play together, right? And so new moons, some people would consider it the dark moon. I think we've gotten to a point where a lot of people talk about it and just say it's the new moon. There are people who the new moon actually signifies when the moon has a sliver of light to it, and instead would consider this the dark moon. But for some reason, terminology as we go in general public, so here again we're balancing our truths, right? In the broader sense of it, most people call the dark phase of the moon the new moon. So I will continue to call it the new moon just because that's what I call it the most often, right? And so when we have a new moon, that is the point in our cycle when we are clearing things out and we're planting seeds. So this is the moon phase where it's let's set our intentions. If we're going to do a 28-day cycle from new moon to new moon, that would be, okay, we're going to plant our seeds for the intention. We get to the point where about halfway we can see how it's really going, right? That's our full moon. And then we get back down to the end of it all, back to the next new moon. And then we're able to see, okay, how did this cycle play out? What did we learn throughout this? Where are things going? And that's the clearing out portion. And we can say, great, now we're going to plant this next set of seeds if we're going to do it in just the lunar cycle. The key that I find for this moon is that idea of actually checking in with the situation. I talked about this a little bit in the last episode as well, where the best way to actually get the most out of this practice, the practice of tarot or astrology, or really just being introspective, is actually to come back and see how things are going, right? It's actually using that introspection to see how things played out. And so when we hit this new moon, the idea would be not to just jump forward into, great, I get to plant seeds. It is the great time for that. It is the time to set an intention for what it is for the next phase, right? But if we're just setting an intention without actually seeing how did it last go for me, we're missing a really big part of the process, and we are opening ourselves up to the potential of not actually getting the most out of it as we could. And introspection does not have to be a very lengthy process. It just needs to be something that actually a few moments is spent on at a minimum. So let's say that the desire for the next cycle, if we look at Libra, and Libra is about, or we look at the Justice card, and Justice is about finding truth and balance, and we're like, oh, I'm going to set seeds as far as that goes. Okay, I would like for this next cycle to really step into more of owning my truth. I know that I feel better when I stand up for myself. Cool. I'm going to make sure that that is what I focus on for this next 28 days. I would like to do that. Now, before we go with that, to be able to go, I'm going to do this, and because that and part is like, okay, but how do we feel like that would be best served? So if you can say, okay, I haven't always stood up for myself because I have maybe felt a little bit awkward when I say I really like this thing, right? And so then it's like, okay, when I feel awkward about that thing, what does it bring up? Okay, so for then this month, I know that there's a potential that I could feel that way, but I'm going to step into feeling uncomfortable for the month and trust that I can grow in the way I would like to grow. And I will keep coming back to it. And then when this month is over, then it's like, oh, did I do that thing? I had this desire. I set the intention. I decided I wanted to move forward in this way. Did it happen? Okay. And if we don't take that time, we get to the end of the month and we're like, I didn't stand up for myself. I got to stand up for myself next month. And then we're just cycling back through without the actual coming back to ourselves and going, oh, well, why didn't I? What came up? Okay. And that introspective step is really important, especially on these new moons or any time where we're trying to set new things, because it gives us that chance to come back and really understand. If we don't know where we are now and we don't know where we're going, it's a lot harder to actually get there, because if we're not truthful about where we are, then how can we get to that next spot? Because we could be much farther away than we realize we are. And so that introspection is such an important part of this entire process. So as you set intentions for the new moon, I invite you to step into that as well. Now, when we're looking at new moons and the cycles, another thing that we can do when we have a new moon is that we can look at where the new moon falls in our chart in the same way that we looked at where the eclipses fell in our charts, to be able to really get a little bit deeper into the situation. Now, another way to really utilize that is if you're looking at it in your chart, you know that 6 months from now you'll have a full moon in that spot in your chart, and then 6 months later you'll come back. So 1 year from now we will be back and having this new moon in Libra, right? And so by knowing that, you can also use the entire year, all 12 cycles, to also see growth over time on a longer scale. Some goals are great for just those 28 days. Some goals are great for the 6 months from new moon to full moon. And some goals we want that whole entire year. It's really interesting to think about goals in the sense that change can be both quick and long, in the sense that sometimes we see instant changes because we've shifted just enough that something shifts inside of us and we can really sense that big difference of what's happening. Let's say the goal is to actually start moving our bodies intentionally again, right? And your first goal, when you're trying to do that, you see it immediately when you're like, oh, okay, my muscles are a little bit more sore the next day. Oh, I feel like, I can tell that I've moved my body in a way where I took more steps than I planned on, or I lifted a weight heavier than I planned on it, right? I feel soreness after I lift weights. It's something that I've gotten back into now that our kids are a little bit older. We're actually lifting weights again and working out in a way that I used to, and I have not in a while. So I can feel in my body the change happening. But when you think about how quickly I can actually go from I'm lifting 10 pounds today, I want to be lifting X number later, it's not necessarily going to happen immediately. There are times where from week to week to week, I'm still on that same weight over and over and over because I am building the muscles up and building my strength up. And so I remember not to get down on myself on the fact that the weight has not increased that I can lift just yet, but I am noticing in small ways, oh, but I'm able to lift it easier. I can't lift heavier than this, but I can lift this a little bit easier than I could last week, maybe. And so we can remember that when we goal set and when we make these intentions with the moons, sometimes things are just able to happen in a short span of time, and some things need a much longer span of time to actually get the full results that we actually want. And we don't need to be discouraged by that. We get to enjoy the process of going, okay, we're making our progress, we're doing this, and we are making steady results. Because by doing steady growth, we're able to actually create long-term sustainable growth. So that's why sometimes it's nice to do just a month single moon cycle, and sometimes it's really nice to do a full year and be like, okay, I know for the next year we're going to work on this, and this is where I would like to get going with it. So just something to consider. Now, if we are trying to set some intentions along this new moon, I might suggest that since justice is the card that's associated with it, focus on your truth. Consider things that maybe you have not felt like you've been able to tap into, or you would like to tap into more. Spend some time thinking about things that would be nice to grow as far as your truth goes, or in understanding other people's truths, or showing up and understanding the world a little bit better. That is the vibes of the justice card that we can be focusing on here. It is on Tuesday. If Tuesday doesn't feel like the right day to set these intentions, you do not have to do it exactly on the day of the new moon either. So just a reminder that the moon does get to a point where it is at the most dark it will be. That's going to be at some point in time on Tuesday. However, if Monday feels like your intentions day and you'd much rather spend some time there, if the weekend gives you more of an opportunity to get those ideas flowing and that information on what you'd be interested in, if it doesn't happen until Wednesday, you've got a nice span of time to kind of hone in on that if it is something you would like to work with. We give ourselves some grace. We allow ourselves the chance to trust the process and flow with it and know that it does not have to be exactly on that date. Sometimes we get busy. Sometimes it just doesn't work out exactly when we think it should be. But if we are interested in allowing it to happen, it can still happen. Just got to allow for it. Okay. So that's your permission slip that it does not have to be exactly on Tuesday. If this is something you want to do, just give yourself some time between now and let's say Wednesday, the 22nd, right? Sometime in there is going to be great for setting your intentions. And yeah, I'm excited to hear how this new moon finds you. And right after our new moon, the sun happens to move into Scorpio. Now, Scorpio is associated with the death card. So if you're watching this on video instead of listening to it, I am holding up the death card. And so the death card is our main cycles card. This is what I would consider the most cyclical of all of the cards. Obviously, we work through it. We go through the major arcana and come back to the beginning with the Fool and number one, right? We can do that anytime. But the thing about the death card is the death card is our card that reminds us that things die. Imagine that. But the thing about things dying means that cycles come to an end. Okay? There are times that things need to wrap up before we then move on to the next thing. Again, my favorite metaphor for this is the garden, right? When you plant a garden, you plant a seed, the flowers grow, they produce beautiful blooms. Sometimes it produces fruit or vegetables, depending on what it is. And then it dies. It is done with its cycle. The seeds drop. And eventually, when the time is right, it will grow again. Okay? So, this is our reminder. When the death card shows up, it does not necessarily mean somebody or something is actually going to die, but it does mean a cycle is coming to an end. The fact that this shows up in Scorpio season, this is the time when we're finishing up our harvest. Yes, there's winter harvest, okay, but our most bountiful time during the summer, that is coming to an end. We are now coming into our darker seasons. Things are getting to the point where the nights are longer. We have this cycle of knowing that death is among us. It is with us. It is something that we go through. Okay. So death is one of those things that we all need to actually go through these cycles. We need to be willing to let go of things that are no longer serving us. The plant does not keep growing because it has no need to continue to grow. It reproduced, and now the seeds will be scattered and new seeds will be planted so that a new plant can grow, right? It knows that the time is up for that. The fantastic thing is then that makes space for the new things to grow. So when we remember that this is a time where we let go so that we can blossom into something new. If our garden has too many plants, things can't grow because it all gets choked out. We don't have enough resources for everything. We don't have enough sunlight. We don't have enough water. We don't have enough nutrients in the soil. Okay. We can't just have everything grow all the time indefinitely. We do not have the capacity in our own bodies to do everything we want to do most of the time. We just don't. We have to do things that are right for us at that moment in time. I just had talked about my workout journey. I could not get in the type of workouts that I used to do before having kids when the kids were still really little. It did not work for me. I had other things I needed to be focusing my energy on. And this chapter, this cycle is now shifted enough that I can actually start working out again. But I couldn't do it at the capacity, at the level that I used to do, that I can do now at that point in time. So the working out, the way that I was used to, that cycle ended. That there was a death there, right? I did whatever I could do that was right for me to intentionally move my body. And then now it can come back to life. We can bring it back up. Death is the end of a portion in time so that something new can start back up. We close the chapter, close the book, we start a new book. We start reading something new, right? So death is not an end of everything card. It is an end of something, so something new can start back up, right? Spring will come again. The plants will grow and bloom again. We just have to journey down into the underworld for a little bit to make sure that we have let go of what needs to be let go of. We process it, and then we're able to move on into the new things that we are ready and willing to do. There's a deck that I enjoy. I can't remember which one it is right now, but the death card is actually like the carcass of an animal. Because the idea is though that like other things have now gained life from this death that happened, right? Something has come and eaten this animal that is no longer alive, but is sustaining life for other things. And the bones will go into the soil and they will sustain the soil. Like, it is a cycle where the thing that you are no longer doing, that leaves the chance you've learned from it. You gather the insights and information you need from it, and then you're able to grow something else in its place. And so it's just a really great reminder that the death card does not have to be a scary card. It just is something that is a part of life. It's just a cycle. Which reminds me, I think at some point I would like to do a little talk on what people might consider scary cards. So if you have a card you consider scary, go ahead and put it in the comments, and I will put together some sort of, whether I talk about it in future podcasts or whatnot. I know that there are cards that people consider scary in the tarot. Death card normally shows up as one of them. If there are other ones, go ahead and comment on it, and I would love to talk through it, because for me, a lot of the times I find that the cards people consider scary tend to be our cycles cards. They're the ones that normally have some sort of ending to them, or there's something that's misunderstood in the way that we approach life now, and so we don't always get the benefit out of it that we could, and instead we're just nervous when we know that they're going to show up. So if you have something you consider a scary card that you'd like to talk about on, go ahead, comment on it. I would love to hear what it is, so that I would love to talk about that card in particular and address it in the future. So as the sun moves into Scorpio, this is our card for the next cycle, for the next season. We've got Death card coming up. And so that is on Wednesday. So right after our new moon, we're then moving into Scorpio and the Death card, which is also kind of fun because we are in spooky season, what people often call spooky season here in October. And we've got our, Halloween coming up at the end of the month, where we're just constantly looking at death, even if we've now parodied it out into all sorts of fun ways. But I think I'll probably talk a little bit about Halloween next week. So that is our death card, and we'll talk more on that as we go. Now, it is time to pull a card. What do we need to keep in mind as we set our new moon intentions? What do we need to keep in mind as we set our new moon intentions? And our pull is the Four of Pentacles. Now, Pentacles, Earth, also resources, okay? Fours are about structures. They're about containers. And so this card for me, the Four of Pentacles, is about boundaries. Now, you can see if you're watching the video, he very much is holding on to these coins. The one that's in his arms, he's holding onto it tightly. There's one on his head, and there's one under each foot, right? So there is a bit of a struggle of the feeling of needing to be in control when it comes to these structures. And that's why this is often the card when I pull it, it's a card about boundaries. So it's about remembering and looking at, okay, where am I holding on too tightly to things? Where am I not holding on tight enough? How is this showing up in my life? And so when we're in this new moon energy and we're considering how we relate to our truth and how we relate to the balance, it is a reminder to consider how we balance the coming and going of our own energy and our own resources, okay? And so are we holding on so tightly that we have now isolated ourselves and we don't have the back and forth we would like to have with others? We've decided that we are so rigid in our truth and our knowing that we are not allowing an exchange of ideas. And then we're not able to actually then take in and allow ourselves that chance to consider options and consider other truths against our own and decide if it's for us or not, right? Or where are we allowing other people's thoughts and their truths to just overrule our own without actually checking in with ourselves and saying, does that seem true to me? Is that in alignment with me and my values and my truth, right? And so this new moon is a great one to consider your boundaries and where you are not flexible versus flexible, right? Are we building fences or are we building walls? Which one is needed at this time, okay? And so that is your advice when it comes to this new moon based on the Four of Pentacles. If you enjoyed, please, I would love to have a like on this, for you to subscribe so that you can see when I release new episodes. The plan is still once a week, but sometimes, like last week before last, I dropped an extra episode just because I got inspired and was excited. So that might happen from time to time. So feel free to go ahead and subscribe so that you know when new ones are coming out. And I am so glad that you are here. Thank you for joining me. Enjoy your new moon. And if you have anything you'd like to share, go ahead and leave a comment. I cannot wait to talk to you next week. Bye for now.